Have you ever had one of those moments when you think, wait, is this really what God wants me to do? Maybe it's a new opportunity, a risky conversation, or a challenge that you just didn't ask for. Sometimes God's call feels like a whisper that upends everything, and yet it might be exactly what we were made for. On this episode, we're taking a look at how we can journey together to continue to hear God's voice.
He's a preacher, but not the average kind. He's a preacher. He'll make you laugh till you cry. He'll open your eyes and change your life with food for your soul, unpastorized. Yeah, it's good for your heart, mind, body, and soul. It'll help you get to heaven, the ultimate goal. So come listen a while. You might be surprised. It's food for your soul, unpasteurized. His sarcasm might make you roll your eyes, but it's food for your soul, unpasteurized.
Welcome to the Unpastorized podcast. My name is Sarah Merriweather.
I'm Pastor Bruce.
And we are so glad you are joining us today. We are in our fourth episode of season 3, taking a look at continuing actually in the series that we're calling On Purpose, based on a book by authors Magra de Vega, Sam McLaughlin, Javon Caldwell Gross, and Susan Robb. So we've got this book and the info in today's show notes. If you would like to read it, purchase it, support the authors, come along in this study with us. So in this series, Pastor Bruce, we've been talking all about the ways that we can hear God's voice. And then I feel like the kind of second half of the series has been a lot about finding our call and hearing our call from God and then figuring out how to live that out.
Right.
So something that I think a lot of times we may leave reserved for ordained clergy, at least in the church world. But the reality is we as human beings all have a call from God.
Yeah, I actually, if I was going to lay out the chapters, first one was an independent chapter talking about the obstacles.
Yeah.
Second chapter was really some practical steps to get over those obstacles.
Yeah.
And for me, chapters 3 and 4 were a deeper look at some of those practical steps.
Yeah, and how that ties in with our calling.
Right.
Yeah. So lots of things to learn. It's been, a good way, a little kind of break from some of the, heavier duty Bible studies sometimes that we do, and really just kind of looking at ourselves and how we can make sure that we're taking time to hear God's voice in our lives. So this is our fourth episode in this. We're going to wrap up this little series today. And we will continue on with the podcast with some other content coming after today. So if you're looking for a little 4-part series, this is part 4 of this today. So where you can listen to our podcast, anywhere you get your podcast audio, you can also find the video sort of component of our podcast on our YouTube channel and on our Spotify channel. And you can find the link to all of that in today's show notes. So we're going to be spending some time today in the book of Esther. Actually, really, like the whole book. We're looking at the whole narrative. Not sure we're reading specifically from it, but just have that out. It would be helpful for you to read it. You noted kind of in our in-between little break here that...
If you want a quick synopsis of Esther that's not this, and if you'd like to talk with tomatoes.
If you do, and tubas, yeah.
Yeah. My child watched the Esther movie of VeggieTales a lot, and so anytime I think of Esther, I I think of VeggieTales a lot when it comes to Esther.
Yeah.
And so Esther for me is a pea pod, and just go and watch it.
Well, and we actually, because of that, I told you I would make sure I put the link in today's show notes for
Excellent.
it. So you can go find that. But it is 28 minutes long, something like that.
It's actually shorter than reading it.
Yeah, it's not. It probably is. Yeah, and plus it's vegetables. So go enjoy. Another one that is always good if you're kind of looking for a way to better understand it. We love the Bible Project. We talk a lot about the Bible Project
definitely watch
videos.
the Bible Project video.
Yeah, and both of those links are actually in today's show notes. So you can do your own reading on the side today.
Yeah, because VeggieTales isn't the truest telling of the story.
Yeah, I mean,
there's some big themes
it's
there.
It's a children's narrative.
Right.
Yeah, you're missing some of the gorier details, I think, are missed in VeggieTales. But back to the point. Our hope and goal here is to, help you be inspired to be in your Bible every day. We want you to get out your Bibles, whether it's to follow along with scripture that we're reading here or even just scripture that we're talking about. We hope that it inspires you to go and do some, more reading on your own. So get out those Bibles, all right? Pastor Bruce, would you begin with some prayer for us today in this fourth episode?
Come, Holy Spirit, come. Enter in this time and space with us. Be ever present in us. Clean the dirty vision we have from the world and open our hearts and minds to the reading of the word this day. Amen.
Amen. So as I mentioned a little bit in our opening here today, we are wrapping up this On Purpose series. And this chapter is all about journeying together. It was actually written by author Susan Robb. Each author took a chapter of this book. She is a person we've done at least a study, maybe two studies with before. We did a study that we talked through quite a bit here on the podcast called Remember, where we took a look at the covenants that we find all through the Bible. And so she's a second career pastor. She talks a little bit about that in this chapter this week. But she's really talking about journeying together and how we can join with others in our call for lasting impact, and how it really, to me, if you had to just take what's the point of this chapter, to me, the point was you can have a call, you can discern God's voice, you can overcome these obstacles, but if you're doing it alone, you're missing out. Yeah,
a greater impact can be happened with more.
Right.
And I think the reason why we're giving the point of the chapter is let's just be completely transparent and honest. I'll just say it. This was not my favorite of the books that they've written, kind of some of these authors.
I think so.
There were a couple of really good. It's not that there's anything wrong, just for me personally.
Yeah.
When we were watching the video and we read the chapter and stuff, I came back and I said, this may have been my least favorite chapter, purely off of some of the leaps they took. They didn't connect real well for me.
Yeah, there were some interesting leaps. So we're going to do our best to connect with those today, because she actually focuses most of the chapter on the story of Esther.
Right.
And, we're going to give you a little synopsis in case this is your first time, hearing the story of Esther. I hope it's not, because it is actually one of my favorite little books of the Bible.
I think that's why I was disappointed. Is some of the connections she tried to make just were not there for me.
Yeah, but it is a confusing one, and I think that they're not unfair leaps, but here we are.
No,
here we are.
But I have opinions.
It's okay. Yeah. That's what we say on here is that we don't have all the answers, but
we got all the opinions. But I know where she was trying to go. I think.
Yeah. So anyhow, we're going to be talking through today that, this story of Esther is this. It really does have things where we hear about courage. We understand Esther's calling and how that really became obvious to her through another human. Right. And then certainly she leans on community as she lives into this calling.
Right.
So I mean, there definitely are some tie-ins here. So we're going to try to focus on those best we can.
Right. But let's start with just a little background real quick. When we talk about the book of Esther, we're talking about the Jewish people in diaspora. Okay.
Yes.
They have been taken away to what we refer to as Babylon. In this case, I believe they're more in Persia.
Yeah. So these are people that are living long after the exiles returned to Jerusalem.
Right.
They have stayed in Persia.
Right.
Because this is the only home they've ever known.
Right.
This is it.
And so an interesting point that was actually brought up in the book that I said I made a note that I had to think about people who have lived in this country, Persia, for their whole lives. They don't know Jerusalem. They don't know that life. They know it through the stories of their relatives and their parents and those who've returned, but they don't know it themselves.
Correct.
And so in some ways, and this is not a social justice statement or anything, but we have a lot of people who we call illegal immigrants. Okay.
Yeah.
Or we talk about the dreamers in this country, kids who have lived here their whole lives and all they know is this place.
Right.
Yet they are still sometimes treated as outsiders.
Right. And that's
the only place they've known.
That's what's happening here.
And that's what's happening
here. So the short, I would say Cliff Notes version of how we get to where we're going to talk about today with Esther is this. So here we've got Esther. She was raised by her cousin Mordecai.
Great name.
Mordecai, great name. She was an orphan raised by her cousin, and she ends up living pretty comfortably in this palace. And then kind of finds favor with the king and ends up being queen.
Yeah,
Okay?
and she ends up being queen because this is important actually.
Yeah.
Is because the king was upset with the previous queen.
Yeah.
And kind of has her exiled, banned,
Super true.
gone.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and I think that's an important setup because we learn that the king is somebody who's pretty easily angered, easily upset over like silly things,
and easily persuaded by those around him.
Yeah, as we've learned. And so so what then happens is we come to find out that there's this guy named Haman, okay? And and he gets the king's ear, not literally, the king listens to him.
Hey, can I have your ear?
Yeah.
Yes.
But I want to be clear on that because this is a weird story.
He's becomes one of his advisors.
Right. He's an advisor and he has it out for the Jewish people. So without explaining to the king who they are or even why they're there, he says, listen, king, there's this group of people and they're doing these terrible things, which they weren't, by the way. But he lies and says, they're doing these terrible things and I need you to put out a decree that gets rid of them.
Yeah, often point to the outsider.
Yeah, like just get rid of them. Let's go.
And it's partially because he actually is angered by something that Mordecai has done.
Right. Yeah.
And he really has a grudge with Mordecai.
Correct. And so so here we find it. So the king's like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. So the king does this without knowing that his own queen is of this people group. Right? He doesn't know that's what he's just made a decree to kill all of these people. And so Mordecai learned...
All the Jewish people.
All the Jewish people. And so Mordecai learns about this and goes to Esther and says, like, you got to fix this, right? And Esther, I would say at first is sort of like, no thanks.
Yeah, is reluctant because first of all, she's living in a palace. She's living a pretty sweet life.
Yeah.
She enjoys the life she's having. Mm-hmm. She has the king's favor whenever he sees her.
Yeah.
He loves her, that kind of thing. And she goes, man, if I do this, I will lose my position. But on top of that, there was a rule that if the king had not called you.
Yeah, I mean, the king hadn't summoned her in 30 days.
Yeah, then you're not allowed to go see the king until being summoned. And so if you went without there, he had to lift his scepter.
Yeah, and point it toward you.
And then you'd be fine. Otherwise, you'd be killed.
Right. And so she's thinking like, well, he hasn't summoned me. If I go to him to try to plead for, the lives of my people, he's going to kill me. So Mordecai at this point basically is kind of fed up. And this is where we take the leap about calling. So Mordecai, has this kind of saying to Esther that is, the most famous part of the book of Esther, but where he basically tells her, listen, I think your position, the fact that you've come to this position as queen, is part of God's plan.
Right. But the interesting fact here is God is actually never mentioned in the book of Esther.
You're right. That's my ad.
But he said, you've been called to this, but maybe, and this is the famous line, who knows, but that you have come to royal dignity for such a time as this.
Right. And, so she says, okay, he basically is saying to her, well, if you don't do this, we're all going to die anyway.
And don't think you're not going to.
Yeah, because you'll be included in this. But if you try this, then we've got a chance.
Well, and actually what he says is a little different than that.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating to me. I love this aspect. He's kind of like, well, actually, if you don't do this, I believe somebody else will be raised up and we will all be fine, but you will die and be separated.
Right.
Like, God's never mentioned, but there's an inference there.
Right. And so she ultimately does decide to do it. And this is one of those lines that I feel like is straight out of a Liam Neeson movie where she says, if I perish, I perish. You know what line that is. Well, it's if he dies, he dies. That's from Rocky IV, I believe. Right, yeah. But I mean, it does feel like Taken. Like a Liam Neeson movie.
But there's
if I perish, I perish.
But you also suddenly see her role change. She takes authority, and oftentimes we talk about calling, particularly like a pastoral calling.
Yes,
we're actually told by the bishop, take thou authority to teach and preach the scriptures, those kind of things. And so what she does here is she actually goes, okay, I'm going to do this, but what I need you to do is gather all the Jews in wherever they are. I can't think of the name of the place. Sala?
Yeah, you asked me too fast. It's okay. We'll figure
Okay.
it out.
But
I'll put it in the show notes.
yeah, fast
Yeah.
fast for 3 days.
Oh,
And
isn't it Susa?
Susa, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, now I'm thinking of John Philip Sousa.
Yeah.
Good old March.
Yeah.
Okay, but fast.
Uh-huh.
And what's assumed with fasting in this time is often with fasting, it would be fasting, wrapping yourself in sackcloth and ashes, and praying to God.
Right.
Okay, so that's where the God aspect comes in. But fast, and I'll ask my maids to fast with me, and then we'll go to the king, and if I perish, I perish.
Right. And so it's one of those moments for Esther here where, kind of everything changes. She could have stayed silent. She could have not asked for help. She could have just protected her own comfort and hoped that the king would never find out, that she was in fact part of the Jewish people and it should be fine. But instead, we look to Queen Esther, who did choose courage. She chose courage with community. Right. She asked for her community to give her courage, to, pray with her.
Right.
We assume, right? Even though it's not said, but that's our assumption.
That was the point of fasting.
Right. And in doing so, ultimately did change the story for her people.
Right.
That's the spoiler to the end of the story.
That's the spoiler.
Yeah.
And so we're going to give you the spoiler real quick.
Yeah.
And so after 3 days, she goes to the king.
Yeah.
And the king goes, what is it that you want? He lifts his scepter and she lives. And she goes, well, I want to throw a feast for you and your people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your advisors, including Haman. And so she has the first feast. Or no, the first feast is just for the king.
Yeah, I think so.
The second feast is for the king. And so she said, I'll let you know tomorrow night, but I want to have a second feast for you. And it's for Haman and everyone else.
Yep.
And so what ends up happening is she finally admits, he goes, so what is it that you want? And so she tells her, she admits that she's Jewish.
Right. She's regained his trust again.
Regained his trust and love, is sure of these things. And basically goes, look, Haman has tricked you, laid out this plan before you. And so one of the things that was supposed to happen is that Mordecai was going to get hung out front on this big, tall...
On a pole.
Yeah. And what ends up happening is Haman is the one who's hung on the pole. But the king's edict could not be reversed. And so what happens, and this is where I begin to struggle with how Susan Robb, when we'll talk about it more, is the community she talks about is Mordecai and Esther are allowed to put out an edict for the king that says all the Jewish people can defend themselves. And so they come together as a community to defend themselves against those who would probably attack them.
Right. And so he can't revoke the decree, but he does allow Esther and Mordecai to put out their own, essentially in his name, saying, you all can defend yourselves. So that's the spoiler. I mean, it's a very interesting
Read the story. It'll do a much better job than our quick synopsis.
Even the Veggie Tales does a better job
than what we just did.
For sure.
Dumb.
But she changed this. And so we then look at, so let's go to the chapter for a minute. We'll pop back over to Esther. But so the author here, Susan Robb, she talks about in this week's chapter that she says she has had many callings over her life, that she is a second career pastor. She started off as a teacher. She's been a wife, a mother, and then, felt this calling to ordain ministry. And she shared about how that calling actually came through confirmation from her husband, which I thought was an interesting one, where she, asked God, hey, if this is really your will, I need it to come through my husband.
Ike. I like it.
Yeah.
I like
and then it did. So that was a great part of the story. And some of these parts of her calling, she says, were very obvious, while others felt really confusing and inconvenient.
Seminary.
Right? Like for you, your calling, you've shared about it in this series already on the podcast, but in a lot of ways, your calling to ministry was inconvenient. And that's why you continued not to do it, right? Until you did. And then, but in all of them...
because of other people.
Right, yeah. And in all of them, she shares that she could see God's hand at work, kind of guiding and nudging her along the way. And so I think, whether we're thinking about Esther or about this author here, I think that's often what calling can look like? I think it is rarely clear in the moment for us many times. Like I shared about, we were leading Bible study for last week's chapter. Haven't done this next week yet. But I was talking about how for me, I felt a very clear calling to landscape architecture. When I was graduating high school, I had taken, I think back then, probably some kind of aptitude test. I played a lot of golf. I thought I was going to go design golf courses, and that was what I was going to study. So I only looked at schools that had landscape architecture as an option. I knew that's what I was going to do. I was very clear on it. But for me, so she's saying it's rarely clear in the moment. It was very clear to me, but then the more I got into it, the less clear it became. And by the time I was ready to finish my program in landscape architecture, I actually had the realization that that was not how I wanted to spend my career. And that felt at that time like I had wasted a lot of time. It felt like a failure to me, and I'm sure to others. I'm sure to my professors. I was a good landscape architect. I'd spent a lot of time at that, but I knew that there was just something that wasn't going to be right there. So looking back on my life now to see how God has used those skills and has transformed my life and brought me into, serving in ministry as laity, I look back at that and go, oh, it seems crystal clear to me, like it's looking back. Well, of course, all these steps make sense. But
now
but
you
I
were
remember,
a sculptor of disciples,
right? But
and church stuff.
Yeah, but I remember getting to that point in my fourth year of that program and just having the realization, I don't want to do this. And so, she shares here that sometimes it's only after we take a step somewhere that we realize that God was in it all along. And for me, it was honestly taking the step away from work when I took a few years to be a stay-at-home mom, and I stepped away from all of my dreams. All of the things that, not that my kids weren't my dreams, but I stepped away from all of my,
You heard that, guys.
all of my work dreams, my career aspirations is what I should say. That was not how I meant to say that.
That'll be at the 24-minute mark of this video.
It's okay.
Just to make sure the kids hear that.
At the 24-minute mark. Okay. I love you, my boys. What I meant was, and so, but it was me stepping away from work and spending time with them at home and having actually some amazing years at home with them to kind of rethink my life and reorient it in where God was leading. And it gave me space to, as an adult, instead of as a 17, 18-year-old kid, start to go, okay, where is God calling me? And how can I use these things that felt wasted for God's purpose?
Yeah.
And so that for me was really a big part of my call to ministry.
Right. And you've heard me say I've done all these things we've listed in here before.
Yeah.
I'm a jack of all trades, master of none, but I've used every single one of them.
Right. Isn't that the funny
in
part?
Ministry.
Yeah. That's pest control. Have you used pest control in ministry?
Yeah, I had a couple churches that had termites and stuff, and I identified them and told them what they needed to do.
Amazing. Yeah, God's just funny. I remember,
and I did it free of charge.
Yeah,
so I really failed at the sales aspect of it. But
yeah, early on in my employment here at our ministry context at Jerome Church, we redid a lot of classrooms. Redesigned them, painted, redecorated, did all these kinds of things. And I remember having a moment in the midst of that where I realized I was using every skill set that I had gotten in landscape architecture. Now, I wasn't planting gardens and designing landscapes, but there's a lot of crossover between all kinds of design, architecture, right, interior design, landscape architecture, a lot of similarity there in the scope of education. And I just had this moment where, I remember it was just, I might even been in this room, just sitting here in the church, just kind of laughing at God, like, yeah, I didn't think I'd ever use these skills again, and here I am. And so it is funny, right, that sometimes we've got to take that step in our calling without clarity. We have to do the things that are like Esther. She didn't know how this was going to turn out for her, but she was prayed up and she had people supporting her. Like I had my family supporting me when I, came back to work and and started a job in the church. Everybody was like, this makes sense for you. This seems like an obvious next step. And that's when we can start to look at that and realize that really God was in it all along.
Yeah.
That those things that felt like missteps or mistakes were just part of God's, nudging along the path.
Yeah. Look at you now.
Look at me now. I don't know if that's a good thing, but
yeah, don't worry. There's still mornings I wake me up. Bartending wasn't so bad. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but did I ever have recording a podcast with the pastor of our church on my bingo card? It didn't. Right.
Yeah, but this is an example. It's like you sat down, designed the table and stuff, and we talked about it, and some of the symbols and stuff in the room we kind of designed. We talked it over. I did the sound stuff because I have a sound background. I said, we need these mics and we need to look at these cameras and
right. Listen.
Combined, we're almost competent.
But would you ever have imagined, though, back when you were in sound engineering school, to be like, oh, that's what I'm going to be using this skill set for someday?
Yeah. Every time I woke up in that cabin.
Right. Yeah. Never. Right? And that's how God's funny in that way. But where this chapter kind of goes from there is really talking about how, and using this example of Mordecai and Esther together. And I think this is where you took a little issue with it. But is that we don't walk the path alone. So you talked about, in your call story, you had the guy, the Valvoline instant oil change who spoke into you.
And then after that, all the affirmation. I think a lot of times others, it's like we talked about last week, is we have to name things in others, the positive things. And that's really what happened after the guy identified it and called me on it. And then after that, I received affirmation after affirmation after affirmation.
Right. I really do. I've experienced it and I believe it. And Susan Robb talks about this in her chapter that, God's work really does happen best in community.
Right.
We've got to have people in our lives that confirm what we're doing, affirm it, maybe even, but look at us and go, okay, yep. That makes sense for you. I think that's a good plan. But also we have to have people that challenge us, that ask us the hard questions. Like, are you sure that's what you want to do?
And see, for me in the chapter, if she would have ended, like, I understand she had to finish the story, and I'm glad she did. Okay. This happened during the whole Mordecai challenging Esther thing and naming these things in her. Okay. The part that I struggled with was the aspect of, and all the Jewish people came together and formed community around the fact that they now could defend themselves. Yeah. And I said, that's a little weak for me.
Yes, you were bothered by that. I was bothered by it less in the sense that, when we can just get over the amount of war and killing in the Bible, and I'm not saying we have to get over it, but we just kind of accept that and have to wrestle with it a little bit. That for me, I think the moral of the story is that, Esther, through her own courageous behavior,
provided a path forward.
And
so I got where she's going. I just thought it was just not the most. Maybe it is my discomfort. I don't know, but there's just something about it.
It's okay.
I don't like it. I'm not going to use it in my sermon this week. Yeah.
It's okay that she didn't love it. I'm okay with that. But it does. So, Mordecai did help Esther, as you note, really recognize her moment.
Right.
And, I don't think...
And then the community coming together to pray.
Right.
And her taking authority over it. That...
Correct. Yeah.
That worked for me.
I don't think that if Mordecai, hadn't taken the time to say something to her, I don't think Esther would have done it on her own. Will we ever know? No. But, I do think that it took someone in her life whom she trusted, whom she loved, in Mordecai, to say, I'm going to encourage you to do this. And not like a guilt trip, but kind of challenge her to say, Esther, like, you need to do this. If you don't do this, God's going to use somebody else.
Yeah, so fine, do it in your own
right,
way.
And so you might as well.
It was Mordecai turned into Gigi.
Yes, who's your grandma? Yes. So we too really need people who help us see what God might be saying, particularly when we are too afraid or unsure to hear it. And we've talked about this in the other couple of weeks, and some of those obstacles, right? Was how do we hear God's voice? Well, sometimes we rely on others to help us hear and grapple with the hard things. So, so that's kind of our first little bit here today. We're going to get, we're going to get to the second half of this as we get into segment 2. But before we get there, we have some fun fodder for today, Pastor Bruce.
I have answers. I looked.
You looked. All right. Well, I just made this one very unrelated to the topic, which, sometimes we like to do with fun fodder. We had some discussion, if you will, argument even amongst our church community on a Facebook group post about how you feel about candy corn.
Right.
There were a lot of strong opinions.
Right. Some of them right,
corn.
some of them wrong.
Yes. And so we'll start here. But my question for the fun fodder today is we're going to chat about what the best fall treats are. But before we get there, what are your thoughts on candy corn?
I like candy corn.
I do too.
I don't even need the peanuts with them. Although I am going to try cashews with them.
Oh, that would be
I think that would be good. I also like the pumpkins.
I wonder how pistachios would be. I like the taste of pistachios.
I've never had a pistachio.
What?
I've never had a pistachio.
We're going to have to fix that. Pistachios are delicious.
I don't think they're... No, I'd leave that in. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean like...
Mic check.
Yeah. But we're going to get you some pistachios. We'll fix that. Okay, so best fall treats. What are your best fall treats?
Okay. First of all, anything fresh apple. Okay, particularly my daughter and I made applesauce.
Yeah.
Went out, got the apples, did all the stuff, pumped through. And so eventually some of that will turn into fresh apple butter. Okay. So that's 2. But my favorite fall treat, are 2. One is a nice fresh pumpkin roll.
Oh, yeah. I second this.
It has to be fresh. Okay.
Okay.
The second thing is Krispy Kreme pumpkin donuts.
Oh, I do like a pumpkin donut, but that's a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah, I don't want a bunch of them. I just want one, and then
They're delicious.
And then if it's just like a flavorful kind of thing, like a combination thing, a fresh glazed donut warmed with a nice cold glass of fresh cider.
Yum.
Yeah.
I love apple cider. It's delicious. You stole my pumpkin roll. I do love a really good pumpkin roll.
Just to be clear, I did not physically steal a pumpkin roll from her.
No, just my idea for one.
Yeah.
But I also, something I don't eat very often, because honestly, I feel like they rip my, actual teeth out, but are caramel apples. I just love a good caramel apple.
I have something for you, though, that you will love.
Okay.
I only get these during the fall because they only have them. They're caramel apple suckers.
Okay. I actually don't love those.
Really?
Yeah, I've had them before. They cut my tongue, and I don't like the taste of like the fake apple in them. I like a red apple dipped in caramel.
That will rip your teeth out.
Yeah, I would rather risk that
Those are
than
really
eat
good.
the sucker.
I love caramel apples, but because of that, I do like taking an apple and getting that caramel dip that they make.
Yeah, also delicious, but there's something about like the caramel tastes different when the apple's dipped in it, you know, for sure. Okay. Well, that's fall treats. We'd love to know.
Do you like
your fall treats
a
are.
plain caramel apple, or like them all decorated up with stuff? Because I don't like peanuts, so I can never get the decorated ones.
I know. I mean, I don't mind. Like I've had some with toffee bits on them.
Oh,
like Heath bits. Those are delicious. Yeah, not much for like a lot of nuts or sprinkles or anything on it. Just basic kind of stuff. Yeah. Used to go to the Circleville Pumpkin Show quite a lot.
I've never been to the pumpkin show.
Also a great time, worthy of going.
Staff retreat.
And it's fun, but they've got every fall treat you could ever imagine down there. So caramel apples are usually what I would get.
Yeah, see, I used to go down to, and I never understood this, down in Lebanon, Ohio. They have an apple fest, but there's nothing apple.
Huh. Well, that's weird.
It's Lebanon.
Yeah. Okay. But I mean, like the pumpkin show had even pumpkin sandwiches. So they made pumpkin sloppy joes, which I know you look at me weird, but if you've had them before, they were kind of delicious.
So they take the pumpkin
no, it was like a normal sloppy joe. It was still meat.
But they put like a little pumpkin in it.
And
that'd be all right.
Honestly, it was good. I like a pumpkin muffin.
Pumpkin bread.
But I'm not much for like a pumpkin spice latte.
Yeah, I don't like the pumpkin spice stuff.
Yeah,
I do like a good hot cider also, like a mulled cider.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
Maybe
now,
at the staff Christmas party,
I
I'll
was
make
gonna say,
some mulled cider.
now I'm hungry. But okay. Well, we'd love to know what your favorite fall treats are. You can also share your opinions on candy corn if you feel so inclined. We have, decided here that there really is no in between. People either think it's absolutely delicious or it is a horrible abomination of
but it does
food.
have to be the original candy corn. Like they do some flavored candy corns that are just wrong. Like they have like the dark, like it's Indian candy corn is what they call it. Like has chocolate kind of flavor. It's nasty.
Oh. Yeah, I haven't seen that.
Yeah. Like they have like a fall mix and it's not good.
No, thank you. Like the chocolate ones are not for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just plain old tri-colored candy corn.
Okay. Yeah. Well, let us know what you think about candy corn, favorite fall treats.
And if it's anything but love it, you're wrong.
Oh, okay. Well, we're all allowed to have different opinions here, Pastor Bruce, but
even the wrong ones.
Yeah. So let's move along into segment 2. So we're going to wrap up this series. And, as you mentioned in our first segment today, in the book of Esther, God's name is never mentioned. I do think that's weird. I had read that before. She mentioned it here in the book. And I remember hearing that for the first time going, what? And actually having to go back and reread and looking for it. But it's not.
It's God in between the lines.
It's God in between the lines. God is all over this story. And so, I think maybe that is the point for us a little bit, right?
Yeah, well, I think it directly points to, and I think that's why this story goes well with this chapter, it points to not only our dependency on God, but really our dependency on one another. Is the Jewish community is going to be killed.
Yeah.
And they need somebody who will help them. And I believe God speaks between the lines. For instance, is, as I mentioned earlier, usually when you fast, the point of fasting is to draw your attention to God.
Yeah.
When you get hungry, you think about God. But also during that time, the practice was if you fasted, you also wore sackcloth, which is burlap. Okay. And you sometimes covered the burlap in ashes. Okay. And so if you're wondering what that feels like, it's be itchy.
Yeah. Itchy and burny. Yeah. I feel like,
Nothing like a good little caustic burn with some itchy fabric on top.
Yeah. That sounds terrible.
Okay. And then prayer.
Mm-hmm.
What are you praying for? Praying to God to relieve this. And, but you're showing your repentance and all kinds of things.
Yeah, one of the things I did really like in this chapter, she was talking about, what's not written in Esther, but we can draw conclusions from. In this time where the community was fasting and praying for Esther, that maybe there were people who came to her with advice that through their own prayer and discernment, God spoke to them and they were able to come to her and say, Esther, I believe God's saying you should try this, or you should try this tactic or think about this way to approach the king. And that it might have been through the prayer of the community and the support of the community that Esther was able to be successful, that it was because she took that time, not just that there was prayer going up, but that there was information coming back to the people through God that made its way to Esther.
When I was on staff at Lindenwold, we used to get together. There was a time of just prayer, figuring out what God was going to call us to do next. And so I want to say it was every Monday night, we met in the little chapel and we sat in a circle and we prayed in silence for half an hour, 45 minutes. And the last 15 minutes was, did God say anything to you?
Yeah.
Because we all agreed, none of us were naive enough to believe that God was only going to speak to us.
Oh, just to you individually. Yeah. I mean, I think that is wisdom that we see through Esther that, was her. She knew what she was doing. Clearly, even though God's not mentioned, we know she is a faithful Jew, right? We know she's a person who believed in the power of prayer. She believed in the power of focusing on God. And, I think it's such a great example of how God often works through people. Right. He works through our choices. He works through the voices of other people and, can give us courage to bring about his purposes in the world. Like, I don't think he wanted his people eradicated.
Yeah. I think the other thing that happened though, is we talk about Esther's deep faith. I question that.
You do?
I do.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. I believe there was a point where she
Yeah.
was, because being with Mordecai, she would have been deeply faithful. When she went into the palace, she had to hide it.
This is probably true. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so did she continue, or did she fall into the trap of the comfort that she's experiencing? And this just brings up a whole different aspect of the story, because we talk about first world problems,
Right.
kind of thing, is we live very comfortably, a lot of society.
I mean, that would fall in line with kind of her initial response to Mordecai.
Right. And so was it
Yeah.
after that she suddenly realized, oh, I better get back to basics to do these. It's just throw it out there.
I think that's a fair
conversation fodder.
A fair sort of way to look at the story. And, I don't know the answer to that.
Because it also shows that maybe God even works through those who aren't faithful all the time. When I had my call to ministry, I wasn't attending church.
Right.
I hadn't been to church in years.
I was going to say, we believe that, right? I mean, you can look in the Bible and see all kinds of people Moses.
God works through broken people.
Moses literally ran away from his problems.
Yeah.
And God chased him down, found him, used him, to bring God's people out of slavery. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think that.
So stop thinking, once again, thinking that, God's not speaking to you because of all these faults.
Right.
That you may have. Get over yourself.
Yeah, there you go. God's going to use you one way or another. But as we kind of wrap this up, I think that's really what it means for us, Pastor Bruce, to live on purpose. And we've talked about this book. Kind of the tagline is that we're created, on
purpose.
Yeah.
For a purpose, with purpose.
Well, yeah, with purpose, for a purpose. And it's not just about this, like, discovering a single life-defining mission. Like, I'm supposed to be a landscape architect. It's not just that.
Right.
It's, I believe, about saying yes to God in all the moments that come along on our way. That, for Esther to have been in that position, she might have had to have hid her faith a little bit, right? For God to use her in the way that he did, that might have been part of her story.
Stop giving her an out.
I'm just saying, she might have had to.
Maybe.
But it's saying yes to God in the moments that come our way.
Right.
Whether those are big C callings, as we talked about on the last episode, or these little C callings, the nudges that come every day, it's really trusting that God's already gone before us.
Correct.
Yeah. So, we're invited here to use our voices, to use our influence, and to use our gifts together to bring God's kingdom to life.
Absolutely.
In the world.
And that's really the point of it, is God is constantly speaking to us as Christians. We talk about that there are seasons for everything.
Mm-hmm.
Too many of us have sat in seasons of doing nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Open your ears. God's calling you to do something.
Right.
God does not quit on you. God does not set you aside for long periods of time and say, oh, just wait. I mean, I believe you wait, but there's still little thing. That's the difference between a big C calling and a little C calling in a lot of times. It's how we use those in-between moments of how we're living this in and day out that really matter. Yeah,
I love, she actually shared the story in the chapter, when we think about how living the Christian life isn't just a solo act, it takes many of us. She talked about a woman whose name was Amy, that there were some women who met in the parking lot after worship service. And this woman, Amy, was standing there holding money and said, I wanted to give this in the offering today, but I can't. It's dirty money. And she was crying. And so these women, ask her what's going on. And to make this pretty lengthy story a little shorter, they come to find out that this Amy had been sex trafficked at a young age.
Yeah. She started off as, she puts as an exotic dancer. It's a stripper.
Right. Correct. But she had been,
that led her into this other road.
Correct. She had been, that was the lifestyle she was leading, and she didn't want to do it anymore, but she didn't know how to get out. And so these women became her friends and helped her out. They helped her get her, high school diploma. They helped her find a different job. They helped her get training. They helped her, get housing. So there are all these kinds of things.
And then it became a whole
And that's
ministry.
what I loved about it, was because then this Amy realized, hey, these women helped transform my life. So she told her friends, hey, my friends can help you. And so the friends that were still in the same situation that she had been in, now were getting help. And it grew into this whole huge ministry. So, when we follow our callings within community, and sometimes that calling might be the nudge to go ask that person who's crying in the parking lot what we can do for them.
Right.
It may not always be this big C calling. It may be a little nudge that turns into something much bigger. But when we let others help us discern that, there was probably a friend who was like, should we go over there? And another friend was like, I don't know.
Right.
And the other one said, yeah, we should probably go. And so it took all of them there to show up in community, to help each other step out in faith when it's uncomfortable. And that's when we can see what God can do when we just say yes sometimes.
Right. And I think that's what she was trying to get to in that section that I did not enjoy.
Yeah.
Because I do believe the other thing that happens is when we come together in community, we'll often find where I talked about we were praying as a community and we weren't naive enough that God was going to speak to just one of us individually to lead us. It can happen that way, but we're all going to get pieces of this message. The fact of the matter is that ministry wouldn't have just launched on its own without this community. And so it turns into something that started off small. Yeah. Not that helping one person is small. No. But
they didn't go out in the parking lot and be like, we're going to start a ministry
today. It was this one thing, and then they joined together, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And so that's how, when we talked about last week, that weird Christian mathematics, that's some multiplication.
Right. It is. That what God can do with just a single yes that we have. I mean, the yes that those women did was just walk across the parking lot and ask a woman if she was okay. They didn't realize what they were saying yes to. 10 years later, they may have been like, oh, phew, who would have known what that turned into? But God knew. And so a little bit like Esther, the famous line from Esther that, we were created for such a time as this. Maybe your for such a time as this moment isn't about saving a whole nation. It could be, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's just about mentoring one student or speaking up for one person who's struggling or saying yes to a nudge that won't go away or, fostering a child or, listening to a friend. It might just be lunch with somebody or praying for somebody or letting them know you're praying for them when they pop into your mind. It could be any of these little things.
Yeah, but
right?
I mean, whatever it is, we need to trust. That's the big part, is trust that God is already at work, and God's calling isn't about, like you said, being ready.
No, it is not. Right. It really is most importantly about being willing. I don't even know that comfort zone is the right thing, but it's being willing just to say yes when we feel this nudge from God, and trusting that even if sometimes it's not actually God's voice, that He's going to turn our yes for good.
No, it goes back to what we learned in week 2, being in the here and now, and being willing to just take that next faithful step.
Yeah. So, we want to thank you for joining us, for this On Purpose series as we launch season 3 of the podcast. And I think it is a great book. We really have enjoyed it. There's a video component. So if you want to do the study on your own, if there's something in here that has piqued your interest and you'd like to learn more, all that information is going to be in the show notes. So you can find that info out. But let's take a look back at where we have been today, Pastor Bruce.
Yeah, we discovered how Esther's courage reminds us that God calls us to act for such a time as this.
Yep. That's the story of Esther. And then, we continue to learn how community helps us to discern God's voice and how we can live out our calling together. It does not need to be a solo sport, right? Christianity is a team sport.
And then also, be encouraged to say yes to God's nudges, even when they lead somewhere unexpected.
Yeah, and actually, I think they almost always lead somewhere unexpected.
Oh, always.
so
if you have
an even win.
If you have a question, want to learn more, or you're going through something that we can just be praying for or with you, we'd love to hear from you.
Sure would. You can connect with us and find our podcast through the info in today's show notes or by visiting our website at unpastorizedpodcast.com.
Just as a reminder, new episodes are dropping each week on Mondays. And we're ending this series today, but we'll have a new series coming up shortly.
Yeah, we will. So that's it for the Unpastorized podcast of this episode. We want to thank you for hanging out with us to discuss our purpose and how we can journey together as we hear and discern God's call.
And we hope you had as much fun as we do. We love doing this. And remember, we may not have all the answers.
Oh, we don't, but we've got a lot of opinions. I feel like we had a lot today, Pastor Bruce. Maybe more opinions than usual.
Bonus opinions.
Bonus opinions.
So you just go ahead and keep on journeying with us. Keep laughing, keep growing, and keep following Jesus.
Yep. So until next time.
I'm the opinionated Pastor Bruce.
And I'm Sarah, just dealing with your opinions. And this has been the Unpastorized podcast.
I want a donut.
Come listen a while, you might be surprised, it's food for your soul.